Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is the BRN Sunday podcast. I'll be joined by members of the media, financial services, and academia as we analyze all the news this week in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and more. We've got another great show for you this week, and our contributors are gearing up for a great conversation. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Broadcast Retirement Network's BRN Sunday podcast. We're going to kick things off with a look at personal finance. Joining me on the line, she is a personal finance reporter with The Legal, Miss Mari Backman. Hi, Mari. How are you?
Doing well, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing okay. A little gray day out when I look outside the window. I know last night we had some thunderstorms in our area, some boomers going on.
Yeah, us too. Crazy times. I think it just was going off nonstop for about 3 hours last night. So not a lot of sleep on my part, but you know what? At least it's a break from the heat.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully cool things down. I think people here in if you're not familiar with what's going on in the Northeast, I mean, it was close to, 94, 95 degrees this week. Certainly other parts of the country feeling heat as well, but we could use the cooler weather. I wouldn't say I would, be saying that back in the cool weathers of January, but we need some cooler weather to prevail this weekend. So, Mari, lots going on. I know you want to talk unemployment. There's stimulus. There's a new round of stimulus that's being considered. Take us through it.
Yeah, Jeff, I was going to segue off of your whole, heat wave thing. So another thing that's heating up, unfortunately, is unemployment. So couldn't help it. So so the last week there were 1.4 million Americans filing for first-time unemployment benefits, and that's significant because it's basically the first week in a while where the number of jobless claims has gone up. Now, that's not surprising given that, as the COVID-19 outbreak kind of worsens throughout the country, a lot of states are starting to impose more restrictions, and that's going to have a huge impact on job loss because a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the bars that are maybe now being told you can't have indoor dining or you have to shut down or you have to limit capacity, that's obviously going to result, immediately in jobless claims, and that's just one example. So yeah, we saw a little bit of an uptick in unemployment in the past week. Now for context, back in March, there was a single week of nearly 7 million claims, so you could say that 1.4 million is not that bad, but let's not mince words. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of people, and if you add that to what already, as you mentioned, those that are unemployed, that becomes a significant number. Now, Mari, I know you want to talk about the potential for more stimulus, but I believe that some of the $600, the additional amount of money that you were getting for unemployment may expire soon. What can you tell us about expanding that or extending that, maybe is the better word?
Yeah, so it's actually, Jeff, it's expiring now pretty much because the CARES Act, which was passed back in March, so it allowed for a $600 weekly boost to unemployment benefits. And to be clear, that's $600 on top of what you were normally eligible for. The CARES Act said that it would expire, that boost would expire by July 31st. But here's the thing. So basically, most states pay unemployment benefits on a weekly cycle that ends either on a Saturday or a Sunday. Now, the CARES Act says that the $600 weekly boost can remain in effect until July 31st, but it doesn't say that it can expire sooner. So what's going to happen is this is going to be the last week that a lot of people are going to get that boost because the 31st is actually a Friday. So this Saturday or this Sunday, that's basically the final payment on that. But the good news is that lawmakers are working on a second stimulus package, one that they say they'll be revealing on Monday. Now, at first they had said that they would reveal it on Thursday. That's already been pushed, so don't quote me on that. But thankfully there is talk of extending some sort of boosted unemployment. It's probably not going to be $600 a week, though. The big sticking point with that $600 figure was that for a lot of people, it basically meant they were getting a raise on unemployment. And so first there was the argument that that shouldn't be happening, that people, who are out of a job, while we want to help them out, they shouldn't necessarily be getting more money from unemployment than they did at their jobs. And then the other thing, of course, is that if you are going to put workers in a situation where they're being paid more money to sit home, they're not going to want to return to the workforce when that opportunity presents itself. And so, lawmakers have been very invested in, making sure that if that boost is extended, it's also capped so that, workers aren't kind of coming out ahead on unemployment. The latest...
I was going to add, I just want to echo what you were talking about, which is it actually is a disincentive for people to return to the workforce if they are getting paid more to not work. And the purpose of this was to give people a little bit of a cushion, if you will, right, Maury, so that they would not be in so many financial straits. You had that along with that $1,200 stimulus per person per family that was supposed to give people that cushion, and so that was the purpose here. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. And another thing with that $600 boost is that yes, while some people were getting a raise, let's also remember that a lot of people lost their health insurance when they lost their jobs. So while some lawmakers have said, oh, well, these people are, making out like crazy. They're, coming out with all this extra money. Well, not really if they're then going and, covering the cost of health insurance premiums. But that's sort of a separate issue. But what it's looking like is that in the next stimulus deal, there will be a boost to unemployment that will aim to replace more like 70% of a worker's wages. And economists did the numbers, and they're basically saying the projections were the boost will give unemployed workers an extra $188 to $310 per week, depending on how the final deal shakes out. So that's one range that I've seen put in writing that people may be able to kind of look toward for at least some clue as to what's happening with boosted unemployment.
And we've got to rely on the lawmakers. You said possibly Monday, and then they have to vote on it. So that just because it comes out, does that mean that they vote on it, or is it something that they're just they have to debate?
On Monday, they're going to present it. They're going to present the package supposedly, and another big part of that. Two big parts of that, actually. Another big part of that is direct stimulus payments. So I am hearing that there will be a direct stimulus payment, but what it amounts to and who's eligible for it, that's up for debate. It may not be in the amount of $1,200 like it was under the CARES Act. Additionally, the income thresholds for qualifying may not be the same. I've heard that they're looking to direct the second round of stimulus payments to lower earners only. So I don't necessarily think that the public should sit there thinking, oh, great, I've got more money coming to me. That's not necessarily the case. But another thing that that is probably going to be a part of the next stimulus deal, and this is important, is another round of Paycheck Protection Program loans. So PPP loans were made available under the first relief package. They were eligible. They were allocated to small businesses, businesses with 500 or fewer employees. So basically what those loans did was they allowed a lot of businesses to keep people on payroll and saved millions of jobs. The problem, though, PPP loans, which actually are forgivable if you use at least 60% of them for payroll costs, PPP loans were capped at 2.5 times a business's monthly payroll costs. So when we think about it, when we do the math, a lot of those loans were dispersed back in April and May. So now that we're at the end of July, a lot of that money has been exhausted. But lawmakers are saying that for hard-hit businesses, there may be a second round of PPP loans. So that could actually help a bit with unemployment because on the one hand, we see that, more businesses are having to close down or, more restrictions are being implemented. That's bad for unemployment. But if there's a second round of PPP loans, that might offset some of that damage by making it possible for these businesses to retain staff even if they're not actually open.
So really important, a lot of smaller businesses may have to shutter if we have second round of closures. This is really important to kind of keep some of those businesses alive, lack of a better word, and keep those employees. I wonder, Maury, if they will change some of the PPP rules because I think they were pretty restrictive if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I know beyond just you've got to use 75% towards payroll. I'm not referring to that, but making sure that other types of businesses can be covered that maybe don't have a payroll program, or maybe they're using contractors, things like that. All those, those businesses are not really covered under the Paycheck Protection Program.
So actually, one thing, the PPP initially was a little bit more restrictive, and Jeff, they actually updated that 75% requirement
Yep.
to 60%, giving businesses a little bit more leeway to spend that money on other costs. What's funny is that actually, you say that the first round was too restrictive, but a lot of the criticism about the program was that it actually wasn't restrictive enough. To qualify for the first round of funding, all you really had to do as a small business owner was certify to the fact that you needed the money based on quote-unquote economic uncertainty. And really, this was back in, April when, everything just looked so dire. Who wasn't in a situation where, he or she could claim economic uncertainty? So the parameters were actually pretty loose back then, and what I'm hearing is that for the second round, it's actually going to be a bit stricter, Jeff. They're actually going to probably limit this round to businesses that can prove that they've seen a decline in revenue throughout the pandemic. That wasn't a requirement the first time around. So I think that's going to be significant. But also, hopefully, what that does mean is that the money in this second round goes to the businesses that need it the most. And maybe we'll see that this time around, because of that restriction, maybe those loans won't be capped at 2.5 times, monthly payroll. Maybe struggling businesses will be able to get money to cover additional months of payroll, which would definitely help with the unemployment problem.
Yeah, let's hope that it gets into the hands of the right types of businesses, though, Mari, because a lot of people, I was just did a story on the program where financial advisors, many of the top 100 financial advisors in the country, took money, but they, and that was a huge source of consternation for many. But if big companies are standing in line to get these loans, then what about the smaller businesses that couldn't get them, that didn't have time to weigh in or hit the refresh button so many times? It was a very complex, as you know, a very complex process. So I'm hopeful that they open it up, and I'm hoping more smaller businesses can take advantage of that. With these new requirements that make sure that you actually need the money. Definitely something that was missing last. Sorry, go ahead.
All told, Jeff, I think we have to just hold out hope that this next stimulus deal, whatever the specifics wind up being, let's really hope that it serves the very important purpose of getting money into the hands of the people and businesses that need it the most. That's really what the core of it is, right?
Amen.
Sure, the stimulus payments. Even a family that's not struggling, you give that family a stimulus payment, and that family puts it back into the economy, and that helps. Don't get me wrong. But, let's be real. The people who should be getting stimulus payments are the people who are, low-income earners who really need the money. And money should be allocated toward boosting unemployment so that people who are jobless and are likely to remain jobless for the rest of the year can at least cover their basic bills. And yes, we need that PPP funding to go to those businesses that are really hard hit. So let's just hope that, this next relief package is maybe, dare I say it, a little bit more targeted than the first. I don't actually think that would be a bad thing at all.
Yeah, your mouth to whose ears, and look, I think we're all gonna, we're in a tough predicament here. We're down this road, and hopefully lawmakers can at least get along long enough to pass this next round of stimulus, keep things going, while we still try to sort things out, because things are a mess at the state, local, and federal levels in terms of the coronavirus response. Mari, always a pleasure chatting with you. I always learn so much, and I'm so glad we could kick off the show today with you, and as well, really important topics. Take care, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears and end our show as we always end our show with a visit from the Legal Eagles. They are America's rock stars when it comes to retirement plans and everything going on the Hill. David Levine, Kevin Walsh, both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. How you guys doing today, David?
We're doing great, Jeff. You can say that so fast. I'm going to try to be really quick and say everybody have a nice weekend or a nice week coming up, and I'm going to hand it back to you.
Oh, well, thanks, David. I appreciate that. Kevin, what is top of
David,
mind for
keeping it tight to the script this week.
He
I'm
did.
impressed.
I'm looking at the script, and he kept it less than the 30 seconds I usually give him, but it usually winds up being 10 minutes. Anyway.
Well, hold on. Then I got a whole bunch to talk about here. Let me think slowly. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
Okay, well,
All
this
right,
is...
so this week we're talking proxy voting.
Go ahead, Kev. Yes, proxy voting.
Okay. So it's been an exciting month now from the Labor Department and now the SEC, where we've begun to see kind of a torrent of rules. And this past week, we saw the SEC released its long-awaited final proxy voting rule. And what the rule does is it kind of places a whole bunch of responsibilities now for kind of the large proxy voting firms to be more engaged with issuers before they make recommendations to shareholders. Mm-hmm. And these rules kind of come on the heels of concerns that Republicans have raised in recent years that proxy voting has kind of fallen into, there's really three firms that control, the vast majority of all proxies in the US, and that at times they've voted them in ways that are inconsistent with the wishes of management. Now, when you're going to shareholders for approval of things, you'd expect that there would be times on, exec pay or incorporating different values into your corporate culture, where management and shareholders might have divergent interests. But the Securities Exchange Commission seems to be addressing a concern that, these proxy voting firms may have become too powerful in influencing the decision making across kind of the big spectrum of publicly traded companies in America. So some of this can be seen as trying to dilute their impact. What's interesting from a retirement perspective is that, SEC finalized a rule this week. If we look over at the Office of Management and Budget, it looks like the Labor Department has submitted a rule of their own on proxy voting. So, much like we talked for a year or so about the idea that the Department of Labor is going to harmonize its fiduciary standards with the SEC's new regulation best interest, there's a fair amount of speculation right now that when we see this proposed proxy voting rule, it might harmonize more with what the SEC is doing. It might limit, the influence that proxy voting firms have in terms of helping plan sponsors or in terms of directing plan sponsors in how they're going to vote their proxies when they're weighing in on corporate decision making.
Real question for well, before you jump in, Kevin, David, just real quick question.
Sure.
When something like this, and maybe David, you can answer the question, but when you have the Department of Labor and the SEC issue a similar type of rule, so as Kevin said, proxy voting rule comes out from the Securities and Exchange Commission, DOL is coming up with its own take on something similar. How does that get reconciled? But in terms of what.
Well,
so that's a great question, and I think you really hope that they're reconciled well.
Yeah.
But we have seen situations where one agency has a rule and the other agency either disagrees with that rule or comes out with a different interpretation, and then you've got a whole mess on your hands. So I think you're pointing out, Jeff, that we hope that agencies can coordinate to avoid causing that mess for the regulated community.
Thank you. And David, I'm sorry for jumping in on top of you.
Yep. No worries. Well, it's okay. Kevin clearly took my proxy today, but exactly. Kevin's right, and I also think there's one other thing in play here, just to try and wrap up for today, because I know we're tight on time. As part of the ESG guidance, the Department of Labor basically is pulling a lot of its ESG guidance into proposed formal rulemaking. Doing something on proxy voting would also make sense because, as you recall, some of the ESG guidance that's out there already in their other formats talks a bit about proxies as well. So pulling it over here not only allows for harmonization, but it also sort of cleans up the other piece of, hey, we're pulling ESG here, we're putting proxy voting over here. So that's another piece to keep in mind.
Very interesting. I don't know how you guys are keeping up with this voluminous amount of rulemaking that's going on, but it's nice to see that retirement's still top of mind for everyone. David, Kevin, always a pleasure chatting with you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thanks for having us on. It's always good to appear on your show, and thanks, listeners, for listening.
Bye, guys.
And Jeff, I'll just say thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Well, that wraps up this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. I want to thank all of our great contributors, and of course, you, our great audience. Thanks for joining us this week. A lot of big things going on in the retirement, financial services, and tech industries. Glad we could cover probably just some of them. Don't forget, we're back again tomorrow morning. I'll be talking about the DeCia Spark Public Policy Forum, which once again starts up on Wednesday this week. I'll have Ralph Ferraro of Lincoln Financial Group on. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.